philosophers, those who look for higher spiritual goals in life, the moment they acquire certain spiritual qualifications, they can start their spiritual inquiry. They can leave behind the world of empirical desires. They can think of the higher purposes of human life. That's what he says. Of course, there are many quotations there, For example, Vasante Vasante Jeda means during every spring season you should perform rituals. Sharat Kale Jeda, every autumn season you should perform certain rituals. These were some of the instructions in the Mimamsaka text. So Shankaracharya says it is also very important. If a person is sincere, if he acquires certain fundamental spiritual qualifications that make him fit for higher spiritual aspiration, that moment, that day, he can start a new spiritual life. So what are those qualifications? That's what we are going to discuss in the next verse. So the 16th and 17th verse are very important. 16th verse tells you who is an ideal spiritual seeker. It's not only for Vedanta. For any person who wants to read a holy scripture, who wants to read a book on higher philosophy, he needs all these qualifications. Samedhavi Purusho Vidwan Uha Apoha Vichakshana Adhikari Atmavidyayam Ukta Lakshana Lekshita. This is the verse, the 16th verse. Medhavi is the first word. Medhavi, Medha is a kind of higher refined intellect. No, intellect can be very unrefined, very crude also. And the intellect with which we pursue worldly objects, people enjoy worldly objects, that intellect is not the right kind of intellect for understanding meaning of scriptures. Sometimes when we read some spiritual literature which speak about some higher transcendental ideas, we feel a kind of disconnect. Somehow we don't feel at home. The reason is our intellect, a person may be a Nobel Prize winning physicist, but if that person reads a Vedantic text, he will go to sleep or he will be terribly bored. So the kind of intellect that enables us to understand the secrets of external nature will not help us to understand higher philosophy. And especially philosophical ideas that do not relate to anything, that are not related to anything that we enjoy in our everyday life. We don't feel at home very often. The reason is our intellect is a bit crude. We may be able to learn mathematics or physics or any subjects very easily. If a brilliant person can do that. The same brilliant person will be terribly bored if he reads higher philosophy. So why? Because the intellect is not refined. There is a kind of processing, a kind of refining process that should take place before the intellect is able to feel at home in the world of philosophy. So that's why the Medha is Dhihi Dharanavadi Medha. So, the ability to read a holy scripture, to understand the meaning, the implications of higher spiritual ideas, and to retain that ideas in the mind, and to get the clear implication of that particular idea. That is what is called Dhihi. It is a refined, sublimated, processed intellect. That person who has got this kind of intellect is called Medhavi. So the first qualification for us to enjoy spiritual literature is we should try to develop this Medha. Otherwise we can't enjoy it. In fact, what we enjoy is what we feel at home with. We should be able to enjoy. Even if a person, if a spiritual seeker is not able to fully experience it, still if he if he is able to enjoy every moment of connecting with a spiritual idea, that itself means half the battle is won. So very often in the ancient Indian monastic traditions, the first instruction that a teacher used to give is, you should be able to enjoy reading holy scriptures. And you should feel at home. What we feel at home with is where we belong actually. That's our home actually. So, this is the first qualification, medhavi. For that, IQ is not enough. IQ is a refined IQ. In fact, there are having people who are not very brilliant. Maybe one example from our own tradition is Swami Tattwamayananda. Another example from Christian tradition is Saint Joseph. He was born in Italy. He was a very somewhat dull person. But the moment he heard church bells at a distance, he used to forget himself. He used to be in ecstasy. He could not read the theological works of Aquinas or Augustine, but he could enjoy this. So, and how do we express this lack of ability to enjoy? Somehow we feel a kind of irritability when if we are reading Gita, Sermon on the Mount, and if you I feel run away. I mean, that person will be very happy if he listens to the pop music, because intellect is okay with that. The intellect is not okay with this. So there is one way to test a spiritual seeker. If he is able to feel at home in the company of spiritual ideas, that is medhavi, purusho, vidwan. So vidwan actually means somebody who is endowed with scriptural knowledge. So normally people with a refined intellect will be able to understand spiritual ideas. Not just reading alone, but even listening to. They will be able to enjoy. So vidwan uha apoka vichakshana. This is supposed to be a very, very important qualification. Uha and apoha, two words. Uha means the ability to analyze and accept what is to be accepted. Apoha means the ability to reject what is to be rejected. And this is very, very important. Unless we develop the faculty to listen to the right person and to avoid listening to the wrong person, unless we develop the ability to accept and listen to what is appropriate and an equal ability to reject, filter out what is inappropriate, no one can progress in spiritual life. A teacher may give instructions, but that won't work. So this is given in a graphic example. You find the Chandogya Upanishad. I won't go to the details. The story is very simple. A pilgrim was going away from India to Afghanistan. Gandhara, is it Gandhara Purusha Drishtantaha? The example, the illustration of the person who belongs to Kabul. That's the literal meaning of it. Which is part of the Vedic age. During Vedic age, Afghanistan was part of Indian subcontinent culturally. So a person had come from Kandahar. He was going back to his home. On the way, as he was walking along the street, he was dragged, tied to a tree, with a tape on his lips. He couldn't speak, he couldn't hear, and he was bound to a tree. And the robbers took away all his possessions and they went their way. Now, after some time, a compassionate fellow pilgrim was taking the same road. He was coming to India from Kandahar. And he heard somebody crying from inside the forest. So the compassionate traveler went there and found a helpless man tied to a tree, crying and weeping. So he went to him, untied the ropes, brought him to the main road and told him, you take this road, you can get back to your home. This is a story. And then the teacher, this fellow pilgrim, gave a number of instructions. When you take this road, you find a turning, then you have to take that particular direction. Like that, he gave a detailed description of the route. Now what happened? Then he said, you should use your own intelligence. Suppose on the way you find some wonderful fruits, trees, and you forget all about it, you settle down there without continuing your journey, then you won't be able to get back to your home. So you should not be tempted away from your own path. So not only that, you should be able to read the road signs correctly. Correct reading of road signs is called uha. And there may be some wrong directions possible, then you should avoid it. So a spiritual seeker should be able to use his own reasoning power. And Swami Tattwamayananda calls it the ability to develop a filtering mechanism to avoid listening to the temptations of wrong instructions, wrong ideas, wrong information from undesirable persons. There may be some mischievous fellows walking in the same road. For mischief, that person may tell this man, you take this road, so that that fellow may take a bylane and maybe fall over a precipice. So he should be able to keep in his mind the instructions of the scripture and understand the true meaning of those instructions. That is called uha. The other one is apoha, means the ability to reject. And it's a very, very interesting, the ability to say no is as important as the ability to say yes. So this is the general meaning. The traditional meaning is this: Sutyoga parasparam bhedi nyayopeda gariyasi. There is an instruction in the Mimamsa text. What it means is, when there are two views in the scriptures which are somewhat contradictory, apparently contradictory, then what is more logically appropriate should be accepted and the rest should be rejected. So what is logically acceptable? A person who develops his metta, a refined, purified intellect, his own inner self will tell him this right direction. That's what happens. So when our mind gets purified, processed, then our mind itself assumes the role of a guide and a philosopher and a teacher. And if you are taking the wrong step, if you are listening to the wrong person, if you are listening to the wrong ideas, if you are reading the wrong kind of book, then mind, this is not right thing. Once we do that, then our own mind becomes our guide. So that is called uhapoha vichakshanaga adhigaryatma vidyayam ukta lakshana lakshitaka. So these are two important characteristics. One should, through prayer, meditation, through resignation to God, one should refine and process our mind. Our mind is full of ideas, good ideas and bad ideas. There are many undesirable ideas which may make the mind somewhat impure. But by feeding the mind with good ideas, good food, mental food, we will be able to refine our mind. Then what happens? Our mind itself is able to guide us. So in the traditional scripture, pada vakya pramana, pada is the, in grammar, if you should learn grammar properly, then you should be able to analyze sentences properly, then you should be able to apply epistemology, theory of knowledge. It's called uhapoha vichakshana, which is a mechanism used in interpreting the text of Mimamsa and logic. So anyway, that is the secondary meaning. Now we are going to discuss these characteristics. That's why. So those who have got text can turn to the verse number 19. In some books it could be 18. This is one of the most important verses in the whole text, 19. The verse is this: Adu nitya nitya vastu viveka pariganyate Ika amutra phalabhoga viragasthadanantaram samadhi shikha sambhakti mumukshutvam. It is called sadhana-chatushtaya. 4 important qualifications for every spiritual seeker. If you find people who are disgruntled, in spite of following or reading scriptures, for a long time they don't have any kind of inner contentment, it's because they have not fully acquired these four important qualifications. And this is very important because these are the specific qualifications for spiritual seekers. The earlier qualifications we mentioned, Medhavi, Purusho, Vidwan, Uha, Poga, Vichakshana, is in general. You should have purified intellect. You should be able to analyze properly. You should be able to accept what is to be accepted and reject what is not to be accepted. You should be able to reject. These are general qualifications for every spiritual seeker. In a way, it is important for every civilized human being. I mean, the ability to develop a pure intellect, an intellect that can connect with higher ideas. One. Second, the ability to accept what is to be accepted, and the ability to reject what is to be rejected. The ability to say no as well as the faculty to say yes. It's a general. These four qualifications are specific qualifications for Vedantic aspirants. One is Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. Nitya means eternal, unchanging, permanent. It's a literal meaning. Anitya means its opposite, impermanent or non-eternal. Now, in our own life, you find there are different gradations of analyzing Nitya and Anitya. As I mentioned, as we evolve in biological life, in years, what we consider to be very important and relevant in our early years become irrelevant or not so very important as we grow up. Which means we go beyond that stage. Not that we reject them, we transcend them, we go beyond it. So this real, unreal, eternal, non-eternal equation exists at all levels. But in Vedanta, what is Nitya is that which remains unchanging in the past, present and future. And that remains unchanging in waking, dream and deep sleep stage. And that which is not affected by the six changes that we normally understand, Sabvikaras. So this is one thing. This is one important criterion for deciding what is Nitya. Everything in this world, our body, this cosmos, the universe, all these undergo changes. They come into existence sometime in the past. They exist, maybe the insect may exist for a few seconds, the cosmos, the universe maybe for some billions of years or millions of years. But still they originate sometime in the past, they exist for some time and they disappear sometime in future. Which means change. Existence means, birth means a transition from a state of non-existence to a state of existence called birth. Then we go on changing, from baby to boyhood or childhood, boyhood, youth, middle age, old age, death and rebirth. These are all changes. So Atman or Brahman is only reality that is never subject to any kind of changes, because it's never born, so it never dies. It's never born because it always exists. It never dies because it always exists. And then the same Atman is experienced as the same in the waking, dream and deep sleep states, Jagra, Swapna, Sushupti. And it also is beyond the six changes. Six changes, as you know, in Vedanta, Jayade, Asti, Bhartade, Viparinamade, Apakshiyade, Vinasidi. It means something which is born, exists, grows, evolves, decays and dies. Six changes. Atman is only reality which is beyond all this. And this Atman is only eternal reality. Now, this conviction, at least intellectual conviction, is the first requisite for stepping to Vedanta. Now, this is the scriptural statement. In real experience, you find, well, suppose a retreat program is going on. There may be some visitors coming to our home, inviting us to go to Hawaii. So, if I am not coming to retreat this year because I am going to Hawaii, which means that is more eternal than Vedanta. So, that's why nitya, anitya, eternal, non-eternal, real, unreal equation applies at all levels to all kinds of people. Again, it's a kind of prioritization. We all live in different levels of priority, actually. What we consider to be of the utmost importance, that's what we go for. What we consider to be of lower level, of less significance, that we don't bother about. So, if we consider something as something very important, then we certainly go for it. We can't help it. If you lose your passport in a foreign country, then you won't consider something, well, I will try to look for it. You start looking for it at the right moment. So, maybe Shankaracharya is a bit emphatic, too emphatic. He says, it is impossible even to intellectually to get interested in Vedanta unless we get unless we get obsessed with some higher eternal values. Otherwise, we won't be able to withstand it. So, nitya, anitya vastu viveka, discrimination, discerning between what is everlasting and what is transient. Now, after that, so once you become convinced of what is of top priority, what is everlasting, and what is not so everlasting, then we will have a tendency to give more importance to what is everlasting, naturally. And then we don't worry much about what is transient. So, iha amutra phala bhoga vairagya means detachment, renunciation, or non-attachment towards any kind of pleasures, enjoyments, either in this life or even in heaven. Even desire for enjoying heavenly comforts is as binding as desire for enjoying worldly comforts. So this is the next one. Iha amutra phala bhoga vairagya, which means the obsession for work and for enjoying the fruits of the work and be proud of those enjoyments and get obsessed with that. So, this is called attachment. So, the opposite attitude is called detachment. So, detachment for any kind of activities that produce desirable enjoyments in this life or even the next life. There is a word here, amutra. Amutra means in heaven. We must understand something about the school of Indian philosophy, the school of ritualism. According to them, as I mentioned, the whole purpose of human life to enjoy comforts in heaven. As I mentioned, it is kind of the heaven of Mimamsa system is different from the heaven as understood in the Judo-Christian traditions. There is no spiritual element in it. Just go and enjoy for a long time, for a longer period, coming back. That's all. So any kind of desire for sensual, worldly enjoyments is a big stumbling block. In fact, the more we get our mind detached from it, the more we are able to enjoy spiritual philosophy. It doesn't mean that we should never read newspapers, we should never worry about anything in this world. It's not running away from the world of realities. Rather, it is giving top priority to something higher than worldly enjoyments. So that's the nitya. Then, this will be discussed in detail in the coming verses. Samadhi sukha sambatti mumukshutvam. Shama, Dhamma, the Uparadi, Diksha, Shraddha, Samadhana. We will discuss this one after that. 6 qualifications. Plus, the last one is mentioned, a desire for liberation, a desire for getting out of this wheel, Yesterday we discussed this in detail when we were discussing the glory of human birth. We already discussed. Here, we discussed the second verse. So now, first Shankaracharya explains what is this Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka Vedanta. Brahma Satyam Jagat Nitya Ityevam Rupo Vishchaya Soyam Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka Samudakrita. So what is Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka? What is discerning or discrimination between the real and unreal, between the eternal and non-eternal? Brahma Satyam Jagat Nitya. This decision, this conclusion, this conviction is the first qualification for any student of Vedanta. Brahma Satyam. Sometimes we deceive ourselves into thinking that we have a role to reform this world. That unless we do something for this world, we won't be doing justice to ourselves. Okay, this Sri Ramakrishna addresses this problem. And most of Sri Ramakrishna's visitors had this problem. How we must make this world a better home for man to live in. Well, Sri Ramakrishna's answer was, why don't you yourself make some progress in spiritual life? Why don't you yourself read the scriptures, pray to Mother? This is what Sri Ramakrishna says. So, once we understand, once we get a full conviction of what is real, then we can get ourselves linked to that real, and then we can work in this world. Because if we don't get a full conviction of what is the reality, the absolute reality, and then without that conviction, if we work in the world, every setback can become a disaster, a dilemma, a disappointment. So, in the commentaries, one of our senior Swamis in Sringeri, Shankaracharya, not Adi Shankaracharya, but one of the pontiffs, abbots of Sringeri, wrote an elaborate commentary on this particular text. So he says, almost like Sri Ramakrishna's statement, resembling that. He says that once we get the full conviction that our top priority is spiritual progress, and once we direct our energies and actions in that direction, then whatever we do, that will not create a problem. Otherwise, a slight problem or disappointment can have a damaging effect on the mind. So, the first qualification is Brahman is the only reality, everything else is mithya. Mithya doesn't mean absolute unreality. Mithya means what is subject to changes, what is relative. So, you find the whole world of gradation of reality can be analyzed under this category. There is at the lowest level, at the bottom, we have what is obviously unreal. At the highest level, we have what is absolutely real. These are two extreme points. At the lowest level, we can say, for example, in the Vedantic text, they give the example, the horn of a hare, the son of a barren woman, the city that you see above the clouds, small children, when looking at the sky at evening, when the sky is full of clouds, but the sun is about to set in the west, the golden color of the setting sun will give the illusion of a city and shops and markets in the street, in above the clouds. It's called Gandharva Nagara, a city which is really non-existent, obviously non-existent. The horn of a hare, if it is horn, it cannot belong to a hare. If it is a hare, it cannot have horn. So the very word itself contradicts its possible reality. So that is called asat, or absolutely unreal. Even as an imagination, as an intellectual concept, it cannot exist. This is the lowest level, obviously, absolutely unreal. At the highest level, there is the transcendental reality. Brahman is the only reality, which exists for all times, all ages, without any change. Between these two levels, There are two levels of reality. One is intellectual ideas. The other one, the objects of this world. So, if you want Sanskrit words which are very important, asat, pradibhasya, vyavaharika, paramarthika. These are the four levels. Asat means absolutely, obviously unreal, as the horn of a hare. About that, there are certain things which exist only in our imagination. The example is when you see, for example, when you see a rope in a room which is not well lit, not enough light in the room. A rope is lying, dark in color, it resembles a snake. So you mistake the rope for a snake and you open the window, you find it's only a rope. So suddenly you realize the fact that it is not a snake but only a rope. Then where is the snake? The snake existed somewhere in our imagination. But it is not absolutely unreal. We have seen the snake in the forest or in the zoo somewhere, and the form and the shape of that snake resembles the color and the form, the shape of the rope lying on the floor. So naturally we superimpose the shape and the color of the snake on the piece of rope in front of us. So the snake is not totally unreal. It is there, but it is not there in the particular room. It is only in the forest. So it is pratibhasya. Vyavaharika means everything in this world, this mic, this book, all these are vyavaharika. Because this book was in the form of a cotton plant, perhaps about maybe 50 years back, 20 years back. This book was in the form of a cotton plant, or this mic system was in the form of an iron ore, steel, things like that. So they don't exist in the same manner without changes all the time. They change. So it is called vyavaharika or the relative reality. The last one is absolute reality, paramarthika, Brahman. So Shankaracharya says, Brahman is the only reality, everything else in this world is relative. That's what he says. This conviction is called the first qualification. Without this conviction, we cannot intellectually enjoy Vedanta. So even to enjoy Vedantic text, higher philosophy, we must have a kind of dispassion, detachment towards other things. Otherwise we can't do that. That's very important. Now once we get this conviction, then naturally we will have a kind of detachment towards all these empirical worldly pleasures which we understand to be transient. And then what happens? Then we normally develop certain characteristics, certain qualities. So the first one is Shama. Shama means actually detaching the mind from all these manifold sense objects. That is called Shama. It's not that we don't see things, but we don't allow our mind to be colored by what we see or hear or enjoy. We cannot keep our eyes closed. We may see, but once we keep in our mind a higher priority, then we will be always focusing on that higher priority, which is nitya, which is real, which is everlasting. And then we will consider other things as of less relevance, less significance. So then we will be able to withdraw our mind, detach our mind from these manifold sense pleasures. And the mind will not be affected by what it perceives, what it is surrounded by. This is the first qualification among the third category. Samadhamadi Satka Sambati means 6 factors together is called Samadhama, etc. The second one is Dhamma. Dhamma is actually is a big interesting faculty. Vishebhi paravartya sthavanam susugolaki ubhesham indriyanam sadama paragirtidaha. Now when we see an object in front of us, normally our mind also is drawn towards those objects. And then mind responds to that object. I want that object. I want to enjoy that object, whatever it is. Now, when we practice this Vedantic wisdom, what happens? We may be seeing those things, hearing those things, but the eyes bring the visual objects, but they don't enter the mental world. The mind automatically filters out those visual objects. So what about those objects? Those objects are restrained in the golakam. Golakam is not a physical organism. What we see, we do that with our eyes. You may be staring at an object without seeing it. It's possible. We may be hearing sounds without listening to them. Whatever our eyes are directed to, we may not be seeing. What we see when our mind and the eyes organ plus the internal part of the eyes organ, they come together. Three factors come together. Then only the visual object will color our mind. That is true of whatever we experience in this world. It is possible for us. You may be seeing undesirable things, still remain unaffected. Because you may be seeing, but the visual object doesn't enter the mental world. Normally when we see, our mind takes that form. That is called Vrittisarupamitaratra. What happens in the Yoga Sutras. Whatever we see, our mind takes the form of the visual object. But it is possible for us to prevent the mind taking the form of the visual object when we restrain that visual object within the internal organ of the eyes, and it won't enter the mental world. You may be looking at certain things, but if you are totally detached, it doesn't have any impact on the mind. Where does the visual object rest? It rests in the golaka. Golaka is actually the intermediary point between mind and eyes. The external eyes, it is not scientifically demonstrable, but it is something that happens. In actual life we can see. You will be looking at an object without seeing. The image falls on this retina, but it doesn't enter the mind. So it is restrained somewhere. This faculty is called Dhamma. This is maybe if you look at the picture of Ramana Maharshi, perhaps you can see. Ramana Maharshi is looking at, maybe staring at things, but he is not seeing it. You can also see the picture of Sridharamakshana, for example. He is looking, not always close his eyes, but he is opening it. But he is not in the world in which normal people live. So, visual objects are seen perhaps, but then the visual objects do not enter the mind. The mind doesn't take the form of the visual object. This faculty is called Dhamma. So, once we develop higher prioritization, it is possible. You can live in the world of Hitlers without being affected if you develop that faculty. That's what Swamiji says. You can live in the world of most undesirable demons without being affected by their influence. It is possible. That's what Swamiji says, standing in the market in San Francisco, if you can meditate, that's the higher goal, of course. This is an example of Dhamma. Now, Uparati, Bahya Analambanam Vrittehe Esho Uparati Uttama. What is Uparati? The mind ceasing to function through anything external. Means the mind doesn't function through any of the external indriyas, external senses. Then the next one is titiksha, sahanam sarvam dukkhanam apradigara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigatyati. This is actually nothing but this witness meditation. This is one way, titiksha. Titiksha is nothing but the ability to endure all afflictions, all obstacles without being affected by that, without being any kind of without being anxious and without worry and without being excited. This is called titiksha. Maybe that's the most important. Many commentators in Vivekachudamani, traditional commentators, say this is the most important qualification. Once you achieve this, then Shama, Dhamma, Uparati all become natural. The ability. We may react, but we can react without being excited, without being anxious. We may be aware of things. It doesn't mean total insensitivity. It's difficult to understand intellectually. How can you practice titiksha without becoming insensitive? That's what it says. Because when we become sensitive, either you are excited or you are extremely enamored, either extreme aversion or extreme attachment. These are two directions in which mind moves, like pendulum from one end to the other end. But if a person is attached to certain things, then he will certainly be averse to certain other things. The pendulum, if it moves in one direction, then it should move in the opposite direction also. So, this is the first qualification for any spiritual seeker. Sahanam sarva dukkhanam. Dukkhanam here means all afflictions, but it also means every kind of experience we must be able to witness as a witness, as a non-participating witness, not as a participating actor, but a non-participating witness. It is called sahanam sarva titiksha. And titiksha is very important. Without titiksha, no one can do anything noble, anything. No one can achieve anything important in this world without this qualification. It is important not to be affected by negativity, negative ideas, negative experiences, and also not to be extremely attached or overwhelmed or excited by positive responses. Remaining aloof, remaining unaffected, and endure everything without any anxiety or without any worry. It is called titiksha. Then next one is shastrasya guruvakyasya satya buddhi avadharana sa saddha kadida saddhi yatha vastu palabdhi. So, ascertainment of the scriptural ideas and the words of the scriptures, the teacher, with conviction about the truth is called saddha. Now, this saddha is something very interesting. Saddha includes sincerity, honesty, and total absence of duplicity. Because a person with saddha can understand a scriptural idea and imbibe it. And this is possible by developing a sense of sanctity and sacredness that we attach to the statements of scriptures. It is something sacred. It is something of paramount importance. It is something to be taken seriously. That sense of sacredness and sanctity is what helps us to focus on these scriptural statements and consider them to be of supreme importance. Otherwise, it is very difficult to consider, to attach any importance to statements which talk about, we teach about things that we don't experience in our everyday life. Brahman, Atman, Titiksha, Samadhanam, all these spiritual experience. These are only words. So Saddha is the first stepping stone, is the door through which we enter spiritual life. Because, as I mentioned, when we read about things of this world, the meaning is obvious. But when we read about ideas that are not obviously clear to us, which are a bit abstract, which are not tangible to us, how do we develop this concentration? Only through Shraddha, only by developing the sense of sanctity and sacredness. Without that, it is impossible. Once we develop this sanctity and sacredness, then concentration, endurance, titiksha, all these qualifications automatically come to us. That's why Shraddha is emphasized here. Sammik asthavanam buddhehi suddhe brahmani sarvada ta samadhanam ityuktam nadu chittasya davanam. So, to establish our mind, our buddhi, intellect always in the Brahman consciousness is samadhana. Because if you don't do that, the mind automatically goes to pampering sensory pleasures. So the mind should be always focused on this transcendental reality of Brahman. After this, the scripture, Vivekachudamani, it speaks about the process of approaching a teacher, and this is very important. So, I can give an example. When with Swami Vivekananda, in the Colombo to Almora lectures, makes a very interesting statement. He speaks about the spiritual heritage of India, and he speaks about the mystery of how India's civilization endured for thousands of years. If you go to India, if you look at these ancient temples, musical tradition, architectural tradition, you find many of these architectural traditions of India where temples were built. Those traditions still continue. Even now, if you go to India, you find the architects who have been practicing this architecture maybe for the last hundreds of generations, thousands of years. Music. Now, Swamiji compares these traditions with Assyrian, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Chinese traditions. If we go to Egypt, nobody can explain to you how the pharaohs built these pyramids. That technology is lost. What technology they used to mummify the dead bodies, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But if you go to India, you find many of these things are still being preserved. Now, so Swamiji makes a point. How was it possible? Two factors are explained in complete verse. One, the tradition, what is called a parampara, the succession of teachers. Second, the sacredness with which this tradition was preserved. So, Swamiji refers, in one conversation, Sister Nivedita told her that first thing that British tried to do in India was to destroy Indians or Hindus' faith in their own tradition. You destroy it, then it's easy. So he says, every modern educated Indian believes that his father was a fool, his grandfather was a fool, great-grandfather was a greater fool. So once you lose faith in your own tradition, your own heritage, then you are culturally dead and gone, extinct. Now, the point is how these cultural traditions were preserved. The mystery is very simple to solve. This tradition of teachers. Teachers continuing the tradition of teaching, and their own disciples continuing the tradition for thousands of years. Not only spiritual tradition, in architecture, in music, in many, many areas you find it. So, of course, that is the broader application of this teacher ideal in India. But this particular concept of teacher mentioned in this scripture is limited to spiritual tradition. That's what I want to mention. So, how one should approach a teacher? So what are the qualifications of a disciple and a teacher is mentioned here. Vaniyukta sadhana sampannas tattu jijnasir atmanaha upasidi gurum prajnam yasmad bentha vimoksha. So, people, spiritual seekers, endowed with the refined intellect, with a sense of sanctity and sacredness to tradition and scriptural words, which they cannot demonstrate, which they cannot verify through any of the tangible means. They approach teachers with a sense of seriousness, humility and sacredness. And then those teachers, they should have studied the Vedas. Srotriya, Avrajina, Akamakadoya, Brahmavittumaha. So, Srotriya actually means a person who has studied the Vedas. This is the 35th verse. Srotriya. Now, in India, there are many traditions. There are some royal highways, freeways. There are also bylanes. Yesterday we mentioned, maybe during interaction, evening. The Vedic tradition is like a highway, like a freeway. Vedantic tradition. It comes all the way from Vedic times. And the foundation of the Vedic tradition is the Upanishads. It's called Vedanta philosophy, Vedanta scriptures. Bhagavad Gita, all the other scriptures are only interpretation of the Vedantic heritage. So a teacher should be educated, should be trained in the tradition of Vedanta. And the teacher should also be part of the succession. That's very important. This is very difficult to explain. Why should you insist that a teacher should belong to a succession, a parampara? The point is, so Swami Vivekananda, I can't do better than by quoting some of Vivekananda's own statements. Swamiji says, in one context in the inspired talk, if somebody tells you that he's inspired and he becomes narrow and limited and dogmatic, reject him. This is what Swamiji says. Now why? Because a real teacher will not tell you that he is giving you a new truth. He manufactured a truth and is giving to you. This truth did not exist before he was born. So he manufactured, invented a truth and giving to you. Don't accept him. Now who is a real teacher? A real teacher is one who will tell you, this is what I learned from scriptures. This is what I learned from ancient masters. And this is what I hand over to you. That's a sign of a real teacher in Vedantic tradition. Acharya, this is very important. Srotriya is a person who studied Upanishads. He doesn't say that this is a truth that I invented. He says it is written in the Vedas. That's why in Shankaracharya's Bhashya, it is Srutehi. But means it is stated in the Upanishads, in the Sruti text. Swami Vivekananda, when he preaches, he says, all that I taught you, only the Upanishads, nothing else. After preaching, after teaching for years all over the world, finally Vivekananda didn't say that I have given you new truth. But he said, I have taught you only the Upanishads, which were taught by the ancient sages. That is the first qualification of a teacher. Because that saves you from dogmatism and narrow-mindedness. So that's why Srotriya. A teacher should be Srotriya. And he should have studied the Upanishads not from the internet. From a teacher who has studied from his teacher. Who again has come from his teacher. That's why, in the Sadasiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Parampara. Guru Parampara, the tradition of teachers, is invoked in Vedantic tradition. It says it all began with Sadasiva. Sadasiva Omkara Brahman itself. And then in 8th century, Shankaracharya expounded into a compact philosophical system. And then that was studied and taught and successfully, through succession, transmitted to generations of teachers and students, and finally it reached to me. This is the way in which this tradition is invoked in Vedantic tradition. That is very, very important. So this parampara or the success.
Which paragraph is this?
Oh, this is the 35th verse, 33:5. We have got 585 verses and 9 classes, So we have to do some gymnastics here. So, this is very important to say. And once you understand this is a parampara or a succession, then you will understand this is humanity's universal spiritual heritage. It is not a dogma, it is not a doctrine, it is not something given by one individual, it is part of a tradition that has been flowing for the last thousands of years. That's why, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, if you read the Upanishads, if you read the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, complete books of Vivekachudamani, Shankaracharya's Bhashya, as you find, they always invoke the sacred memory of the ancient sages. If somebody tells you this is a truth which I am giving you, nobody else knew that, then you should not take it seriously. That's why in Vedantic tradition there is no originality, because truth is eternal. No one can say it is original, the thing. It is original because it was always there. Every teacher, every acharya is an exponent. See, all that they did was, the old wine was put in a new bottle and new brand name. So every spiritual teacher, all the great epoch makers, they just practiced this ancient ideal and gave it a new interpretation to make it suitable and to contemporary for their own times. So now we'll have interaction, and you can continue.
Swami, so you mentioned the senses not contacting the mind. But actually, when I see something, the mind actually contacts the senses and changes that. I mean, it colors it. So that all I see is this coloration.
Yeah.
So then you mentioned later...
May I shall rejoin that here. Suppose you are focused, you are sitting in a contemplative mood. Let us say reading the Gospel of Sri Rama. You are a Vedantic, you are reading Upanishad passage. Your mind is not, and it is always. Then you see in front of you an ice cream shop, or anything that you would like. You would have taken interest in that. You'll dismiss nothing. You are seeing it, but your mind is not taking.
But Swami, I am not that far. So when I see the ice cream, I immediately can taste it on my tongue. So that is my position. See, so you have to help me here. So then later you mentioned the way to overcome that is adopting the attitude of witness consciousness.
Yes.
So could you elaborate on that? Because I am not at the point where when I see the ice cream cone, I don't taste it.
No. Normally when even if I have seen you are listening to Vedanta. Not only you, many devotees, not all the time, but when they are in a contemplative mood, when they are reading Upanishads, at that time, for some time, mind will be on a higher plane. Not all the time, but for some time. At that time, if some ordinary things come, you observe nothing, you will be, because that's what actually helps us to continue taking interest in the scriptures. Maybe not all the time. So at that time, mind doesn't take the form of that visual object. It doesn't happen. We are seeing it, but mentally when we dismiss it as something of no importance, for the time being at least, then mind doesn't take that form. Mind continues taking the form of some Upanishadic idea. That's why it happened in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. Azra was sitting right in front of his room. Azra was also a very interesting character. So he used to say, don't go there, come to me. But he expected a little more money, some rich visitors visiting the temple. So as a mischief maker, Azra used to sit right in front of Sri Ramakrishna's room. He was wearing a much more impressive Rudraksha, Vibhuti and tiger skin, sitting in a magnificent posture and all that. Okay, now the point is, ordinary people, gullible people used to go to him and used to be, oh, this man is a big Paramahamsa, greater Paramahamsa than Sri Ramakrishna. But not Yam or Vivekananda or others. They were not affected. So even in ordinary life, when you are convinced of the genuine nature of a great teacher like Sri Ramakrishna, though Azra is a much more impressive tiger skin on which you are sitting and look more a greater Paramahamsa, see, they were not taken for a ride by that. So even in human life, even dealing with human personalities, when you are convinced of the genuineness of some higher teachings, you are seeing that, but you consider, oh, it's not so significant. So when mind is on a higher plane, at least for some time, then things of lower priorities we can dismiss as of no significance. That's why this kind of prioritization. So when you see an object, you are seeing it. Normally, under normal circumstances, you may be attracted by that. But that time you are seeing it, but your mind is still what this Upanishad says, what this particular teaching means. You contemplate it. So it doesn't reach the mind, but it has to reach somewhere. Reach somewhere between the external eyes and the mind. That point is called Sussagolaga in the. So right, it is called a kind of internal organ of the eyes. Internal organ of the eyes.
Yes, Swamiji, in Raj Yoga, Swami Vivekananda explains this. Like you see it, but by the external organ, but the internal organ which is supposed to carry the connection
to the mind,
saying to the mind, that organ is off. So you do not, something like that.
Now what happens?
He explains it very nicely. That it does not go to the mind because that internal organ. That's what Swami is.
From the external organ, it reaches the internal organ. This reaches the mind. So what here Dhamma means, what here is these external visual objects or these stimuli, they don't reach the mind. They get terminated somewhere between the mind and the external eyes, external organs. And that middle point is called Sussagolakam. Here is mentioned. That's fine.
But that condition is not something that someone can be given.
No, it once you practice through, in fact, Swami Yatishwarananda calls it a kind of filtering mechanism. Swami Yatishwarananda, when dealing with the problem of negativity, negative ideas coming from external sources, people who will tell you, oh, don't care for these things are nothing. People tell you, oh, don't take the Vedanta seriously, these are nothing. Well, how to confront that problem? There are powerful personalities with lot of persuasive power can poison your mind if you are gullible enough. So, how to do that? In fact, Yatishwarananda addresses this problem. He mentions elsewhere that this, when he was in Germany, traveling in Germany or Switzerland somewhere, he had to give lectures. So his answer was, you develop a filtering mechanism. What is a filtering mechanism? Through proper thinking, conviction, you create a armor plate which deflects, which sends back these negative ideas. Now, in actual experience, what it means is, these negative ideas, negative visual objects reach you, but it doesn't reach your mind. It gets, their journey, their movement gets terminated in the Sussagol internal organs. So in the Mandukya is in this particular text, you find here, Shankaracharya says, it's called, So it is called, those visual objects should be terminated at their own internal organs, in respect to internal organs. That's what he says. So just a minute. Yeah. Virajya Vishaya Vrada Dosha Drishtya Muhurmuhu Suleksheni Niyatavastha Manasascha Manasascha Udyade. Then you say Vishebi Paravritya Sthapanam Sussagolaki. See, that means retention of these sensory experiences in their own respective orbs. Sussagolakam. That the orbs is not a physical entity, not a physiological thing. It is something that you develop through vairagya. When you are not attached to something, if it comes back to you, your mind is not going after that. But it comes to you. Mind is not, it doesn't reach the mind. So it has to reach somewhere. That middle point is called Sussagolakam, the orbs.
But that is a skill one has to develop.
See, when you are walking in the street, these terrible violent music, but you won't just watch there and listen. It's coming to you, but you are not bothered. But the sound waves are coming. But mind is totally unaffected by that. Then where do they reach? They reach their own Sussagolakam.
In spiritual progress, as well as in education, in secular realms, is there a fair analogy with the likelihood finding mission in the law and in courts? So we've all seen Perry Mason, right? Lawyers come in for a lot of jokes, but if you've seen the popular treatment of lawyers, you understand that there's a lot of false testimony, that and by false I mean unreliable. So we're looking for likelihoods, not necessarily truth and falsity, but likelihoods, more likely than not. And we're looking at testimony that's more reliable than not. And so there's a process by which the expertise is evaluated. And in the same spirit as these sections on the reliability of the teacher or the guru, I would use the language of reliable guru as opposed to false guru. And the reason is that I'm trained in this other area where credibility is evaluated. And it's evaluated on a spectrum so that the expert who claims expertise might accidentally claim it. And a lot of the false witness or the unreliable testimony could be accidental and well-meaning. So erasing those judgments is very important, because in the likelihood finding process, there's this desire to simply weight the reliability. So that then goes to whether or not the training is intact, whether or not there's some experience, and whether it's tied to an ability to evaluate evidence and things like this. And yet, in so many realms of life, we don't do that. And here, Shankara is saying all these centuries ago, this is exactly what we need to do.
Yeah.
Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah. You know, of course, one point to be remembered is the logic of modern legal analysis may not fully apply here, because here you are not dealing with something that you can demonstrate obviously in social life or in a laboratory. We are talking about certain spiritual things which we know to be real as a matter of our inner experience. Very often, what we know to be real, the law may not admit it. Our intellectual analysis may not fully be convinced of what we know to be real. That's a very important point to remember. See, of course, when it comes to constitution, what is constitutionally right may not be ethically and morally and spiritually wrong. Both ethical and moral propriety or correctness and constitutional correctness, they don't go together, very rarely. But what Shankaracharya is trying to say is this: But in spiritual life, there is one crystal clear way of analyzing that is very simple and which every ordinary human being of simple intelligence can understand. When somebody tells you, this is the ultimate truth, I have revealed this truth to you, nobody else can know that. I am the one single source of this truth. What Shankara says, don't accept him. What Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda said, don't accept him. On the other hand, again the Shankara and also Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda said, I teach only the Upanishads. Shankaracharya says, this Sutege, this is said in the Upanishads. Sri Ramakrishna says, mother says, or scripture says, Gita says, that's what Sri Ramakrishna. Now, it's because these scriptures contain truths which were experienced by great spiritual seekers who lived before us. So, they are proven facts, much more clearly demonstrated than any lawyer can do in a court of law. Because in a court of law, it is only a play of the words, of the intellect and words. A brilliant lawyer can prove Hitler was a great saint. Can do that. Brilliant lawyer can do that. It is all a matter of convincing people, the judge, the jury. But here, these great sages, they have lived holy lives. They have expressed compassion, love, identity, humanity and brotherhood with the whole creation. And they say they have experienced this. And this experience made them so universal in their outlook. So, that must be true. So, that's an important point to remember. It is not the constitutional propriety or correctness. It is a correctness and propriety demonstrated on the platform of their own real life experiences. That's why Swamiji says, I have taught only the Upanishads. Swami Vivekananda could have easily said, in fact, I have to confront people in this country after coming here. They would be reluctant to quote Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna. They will quote only their own individual Swami's gurus. I have to tell them, you are wrong. They were all trying to teach and preach and inspire in the name of Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda and the Rishi, the ancient traditions. The greatest certificate you can give to all these Swamis was this. They were trying to teach Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. That's what they will be proud of. If you tell them, no, it's their teaching, you will be injustice to them. So, this happens everywhere. I think it's mostly because of the Protestant way of interpreting theology, So, what I mean to say, the greatest of all these great teachers, you find, if you read the lives of Ashokanandaji, Nikhilanandaji, Abhedanandaji, Rani Vivekananda, all these great senior Swami, whom all I met, they all quote the Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel. And when they quote Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel, they quote the Gita, they quote the Rishi tradition. In fact, that is one proof that what they are teaching is genuine. But there are many teachers, I don't want to mention anybody, even in our own times, who will tell you they are inventing new manufacturing, a new truth. What Vivekananda says, don't accept it. Shankaracharya uses a much stronger language. Asampradaya vid, sarvashastra vidavi, murkhavadeva upekshaniya. Asampradaya vid means somebody who says, oh, I don't believe in Vedas, Upanishads, the teaching of the sages of Christ or Buddha. I am this, I am giving the truth. Such a person, he disconnects himself from this tradition. Even if he appears to be an omniscient person, all-knowing person, don't listen to him. Shankara says, he very emphatic. So the point is, you find that one glory, one uniqueness of our Ramakrishna order is, it is built upon this parampara, the tradition, the solid rock of parampara. If you read the Gospel, if you read Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, Holy Mother's teachings, their teachings, the directives, they all invoke not only Hindu teachers' succession, but also Buddha. So one important point is, if somebody tells he manufactures a new truth and giving to you, and he's not giving to anybody, I'm the only one, don't accept it. That's what Swamiji says. There is one proof. Really speaking, is it just like a new, suppose we'll say Einstein invented relativity. But you cannot understand that. It is he created that. He only discovered it. He didn't manufacture it. But that's why Swamiji says, spiritual truths are like scientific laws. They are universal, they are objective, they are verifiable. But verifiable on the platform, the laboratory of human experience. That is a uniqueness. The Shankaracharya is so logical. He says, use your own reasoning power. And I tell you, once we reach a point of mental, intellectual purity, then something in our own system will tell you this is the right thing.
In the end, the jury trial, I know I'm going back to this lower level, but in the jury trial it's interesting because although the jury instructions will say, now here are the principles that you need to use as factors in your decision, you must not jettison your own experience and common sense in evaluating the meeting of the facts and the testimony with the legal principles you're meant to apply. So they say the same thing.
They may be implying you should not use your own prejudices and private
They're also saying, don't be swayed by the superficial rhetoric of anything you've heard. And so in a way it is, they're pointing at some of the same things that you're describing.
Yeah.
It's of course very hard to apply given all the manipulations that happen in
And
the court.
Shankaracharya insists on your own, it's the importance of using your own logical powers. Then he says it has its own limitations. Real logic, creative, constructive logic understands its own limitation. If somebody, one sign of maturity is you understand your own limitation. If a person says, I am the best and greatest and smartest, there's one proof that he is immature. The sign of maturity is we understand our own limitation. Shankaracharya says, listen to scriptures, use your own reasoning powers, meditate, undertake your own spiritual journey, and finally you should reach your own experience. So logic is not the end of the journey. Books are not the end of the journey. But books will help you. Because it tells you how others undertook the journey long before you. And reach the same experience which you have to reach. By others reaching, it doesn't benefit you directly. You have to reach your own destination. So that's the glory of this text. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Namaste.